Willi Smith. All right. So he was born in 1948 in Philadelphia, and he was a self-described sort of bookworm, autistic kid. And from what he said in interviews and things, his parents were quite supportive of that. They didn't like try and sort of curb that or like squash it out of him, which is really lovely to hear. Unfortunately, his parents divorced, but his nana kind of stepped in as this like nurturing figure instead, and she apparently cleaned for a family, and through their connections she managed to set up an internship or like an apprenticeship for him with a couturier who was a big deal at the time, called Arnold Scarzy. I think that's how you pronounce it, I hope so. And through this he obviously learned like a lot about sort of form and fit and, you know, designing clothes, because they were designing stuff for like people like Elizabeth Taylor, like really big deal clients. And although he learned a lot from it, he also said later that he also learned what the kind of clothes that he didn't want to make, which, you know, is just as important as knowing what you do want to do. So this obviously gave him a really good footing in the design world, and in 1965, so this was like a year later, he applied for the fashion course at, let me check my notes, Parsons School of Design in New York. And apparently the woman that did his interview like ran into the head, sort of the dean of the school, like ran into his office afterwards, just like raving about him. She was like blown away by him, and basically said like, this is the best fashion design applicant we have ever seen. So that's like how good he was, and he was still so young. And yeah, so like he obviously got onto this course, this really prestigious school, but then in 1967 he was expelled, and this is in the book, so I'm getting it from that. Allegedly it was because he was having an open affair with another male student, because he was also gay, and obviously now, or at least to me in my little very liberal bubble, that's just outrageous. But to put this into a little bit of context, like, this was 2 years before the Stonewall riots had even happened. And if you don't know what Stonewall riots are, it was an event that basically kicked off the gay civil rights movements in America. Also, there's a much bigger history of, like, leading up to and around that and after that event. So if you don't know about it, I highly recommend that you go and listen. There's like podcasts, there's documentaries, there's all sorts on it. It's really important. It is heartbreaking, but you know, these are the things you need to know about. Anyway, I want to try and stay focused on Willi Smith here though. So, like, how awful is it that he was expelled for just being in a relationship, or maybe not even a relationship, maybe just a fling, either way. But like, because that could have been really disheartening. But at the time, another bit of context is that New York in like the late 60s, but definitely the 70s, was basically on the brink of bankruptcy. Can't even comprehend that now, but New York as a city was on the verge of being bankrupt. So there were, like, obviously still very nice places in New York. There were still people doing okay, but downtown New York, and even like Times Square in the 70s and stuff was not the place to be. I know this is a bit before that, but just to give you an idea, there was like New York was in trouble, but it also meant that there were places in New York where obviously it was very cheap to live, and for struggling artists that's usually like, that can be good in a horrible roundabout way, but it meant that there was this downtown scene full of like new artists, designers, creatives, musicians, bubbling away under the surface. And Willi Smith was basically like, all right, fine, you don't want me, I'm gonna be a part of this, like I can do this. And so he did. He like, how can I put this, he got involved in like collaborations with artists that he was introduced to, and kind of went down that more interesting route that at the time wasn't something that fashion designers really did. And he, like I said, he did loads of collaborations and projects and stuff. Through this he met people that later became like his business partner. I'm kind of going to skip over this bit because he worked for other like fashion design companies and labels and worked for them, and I think one sort of venture that he agreed to basically bought the rights to his name because he was like up and coming, but then didn't actually give him any creative control, and he managed to like win his own name back, which this kind of thing still goes on today actually, but anyway. So he did work for other people, but then he met his business partner, who was she also a model, I think? Anyway, but he then struck out on his own, and this is where things get really interesting. And some of the artist collaborations around this time as well are just wonderful. So I'm going to get into that next.